Coffee Sketch Podcast is our take on the intersection of old tech and new tech, the space between the traditional practice of the hand-drawn sketch that has been performed by architects and designers for centuries, and the modern-day use of the hashtag as a representation of a sentiment or a movement. Each week we plan to deliver a new pod about our ideas, sketches, and what's going on in our daily lives as we pursue our love of architecture, design, and sharing this knowledge with the next generation. I'm Kurt, and I'm in Flint.
And I'm Jamie, and I'm in Austin.
Hey, Jamie. How you doing?
Good morning. How are you?
It's still morning, I guess.
It is still morning.
For you. We're crossing over. I'm in the afternoon.
Time zones.
Oh, I just marketed. No sponsorships by Schluter Systems, but I do have their mug. They do make good stuff though, so maybe they could sponsor us in the future.
You did get to go on a good tour too.
Yeah, in a beautiful city
that
Jamie is from.
I have an affinity
Montreal.
for. Yes, so
which has some relevance to today. This is unplanned.
See, I'm totally unplanned.
Unplanned because Montreal is known for their French speaking, and we have some French today's talk.
And not only that, but you were going to start out with, you had a question for me about this Buckminster Fuller reference. So
oh yeah, right. Before we get to that, before
we get to France,
get ahead of ourselves. So let me share, because we are. I've shared the sketch, our first sketch that we're going to talk about, but I wanted to let you know that you already know that the last episode is on YouTube in addition to our regular audio format. And we already have at least 4 subscribers from a very experimental amount of promotion, where we haven't done a ton of promotion yet.
Well, and that's I would say that's a faster upswing than we started out with the podcast. So, who knows? Maybe, all bets are off.
Maybe everyone's waiting for the audio or the video version. Right. So hopefully, so this is a slight refinement from the test. So now we have the full screen, and I do hope it shows up full screen. This the sketch, right? Because it's the main event. It's really the highlight of these conversations, or the focal point is to look at Jamie's awesome sketches. And so hopefully it's in full screen format for everyone.
I'm here for the coffee. So I don't know about you, but
well, what are you, before we talk about Buckminster Fuller, what are you drinking at the moment?
I even brought props since I know that we're.
Well, hold on. Let me go back, because I don't know with this little screen record. Let's just go back, stop the share, so we could see.
Can you see?
Yeah, pull it over a little closer to you. There you go.
See, it's that left and right thing that we're talking about.
That's right.
But yeah, no, this is it's a California company that apparently has been around for a while, but I recently found them, and I think that the Venice part sort of, and the flavor offering was sort of what drew me to it. I was looking for something different, honestly. Let's be honest. I was looking for something that I'd never tried before, and have been pleasantly surprised. It's described as having sort of a marshmallow and chocolate kind of note to it, and so I'm thinking s'mores and campfires. And so we're getting into the fall. So I thought, yeah, why not? Let's try it and see if we can come up with a different house blend for me.
Cool.
And, I've been pretty pleased. So groundwork.
Although down in Texas, it sounds like you don't need any campfires right now.
No, definitely not.
Still really hot.
Still really warm. Yeah. We had our cold spell. It dropped a few degrees, and now we're back up. So
up here we're getting that the fall format of a cool morning, then it warms up, and then it cools down again in the evening. So I think it was like 55 when I woke up.
See, in Texas, it's sort of like
80 or 72.
it's like as if Texas went to school and learned that that exists as a concept, but doesn't know how to implement it. So the temperature, like when, you don't get that full cycle, you mentioned to me once about the air flushing your house, for the, at the cool and the warm and during the
Nighttime
day.
flush.
And
Yeah.
yeah, that
Yeah.
would
Well,
be
you need
like,
you need more of a 3-degree swing.
yeah, exactly. Like Texas, like read it and goes, oh yeah, swing. Okay, sure.
Well, I'm glad you're enjoying the new coffee though.
Yeah,
And
cheers.
you
And
know,
so what are you having in your Schluter Montreal mug?
yeah, Schluter systems. In my cup is some more. I've been ultra hyper loyal to our local rootless coffee roasters here in Flint. So now I'm back on the dark blend, the one they call dark, which is their dark blend with a cool. I don't have the show and tell, but it has a crow on the cover of the
Well,
bag.
and I would say that no, we're not going to talk about the movie The Crow, but we should add that to like our notes because
Oh,
that movie and
yeah,
that soundtrack. I mean, I think we're going to
yeah,
talk about soundtracks a little bit
that's true.
today, but no, that I will say that Rootless from a graphic design and bag perspective is they bring it, and I appreciate that. So
Yeah, yeah.
and we
I
certainly
believe
need to
they use
get
different artists for each one.
them on the podcast. That's who
Yeah,
we need to be talking to. But
yeah. Work. I got my note. See, look here. There's my pen.
gotcha.
I'll
Note
take a
to
note.
self.
Rootless. So that's sticking with. But I kind of now we just high five rootless. But I'm actually kind of inspired by Jamie's experiment to some California coffee. Now I kind of want to try something.
Well, groundwork has been good.
Take a
So groundwork was a safe bet.
small
So
detour to
yeah.
something different for a while. I'm getting near the end of this bag, so maybe that's what I'll be on the lookout for. So I've now reshared my screen back to your sketch, and I think I'll bring up the music thing in a second here, but I was struck by the drawing because well, being an architect, right? When we hear or we see the word Buckminster Fuller, we start to think about structural geometry, expression of the structure of a building, so then I'm thinking, okay, so then this drawing, right, we have this sort of trussed volume or roof structure or canopy, and at first it didn't ring a bell until I had to ask you what the building was, which the hashtag clues didn't, I guess, sink in quite fast enough. So tell me more about the drawing and why the book is there, because
Sure.
normally Jamie doesn't use
Doesn't use props
additional.
in no props in the sketches other than the pen and the coffee cup. But yeah, no, so yes, Bucky Fuller, whenever we kind of get that reference in our lives, it's certainly the images that come to mind have a structural vein to them. And of course, the story is really sort of a simple, how, connecting the dots in Jamie's brain. And there was in the Twitterverse a very strange tweet from one of the owners of Austin FC, the soccer club here in town, Matthew McConaughey. You might have heard of him, actor, writer. Anyhow,
All right.
exactly, and apparently purveyor of strange and cryptic tweets. So he posts the tweet. All it says is architecture is a verb, has a picture of himself in a hard hat with the Austin FC logo emblazoned on it. It's in that portrait format, so you have no idea where he is. And it set everybody ablaze of, are they doing an announcement of something? Is he crazy?
Well,
Like,
to
what,
be determined.
and then of course Twitter, both the soccer and architecture camp, of which maybe I'm a crossover. So I felt like the tweet was for me. there was definitely a part of me that, said he's speaking to me directly. And I was agreeing with him. Yes, architecture is a verb. And then there were others who chimed in much later on from the architecture Twitterverse who, like, of course, had to correct him on whether or not architecture was a verb. And at that point, interestingly enough, I did not see a single person in that architecture Twitterverse bring up Buckminster Fuller and his classic book, I Seem to Be a Verb. So that's my rabbit hole. But yeah, the sketch, it was funny was that, I thought, wow, this stadium really is an expression of structure. And a lot of sports stadiums are. And I think that's, it's sort of an architecture and engineering marvel and art marvel of form and sculpture. And, in this particular case, it's about solar protection, rain protection, but also increasing sound. So there's sort of a consciousness of sort of trapping sound and redirecting it, in a very, very enclosed or semi-enclosed environment, as well as being kind of a beautiful form. And so this is one of the sketch is sort of an entry sequence, and you don't see the pitch, but you do see sort of one of the sides of the main grandstand and sort of its expression structurally.
Well, it's interesting you brought up acoustics in that. I have a good friend, a classmate from undergraduate days who went on, I don't know if I've mentioned her previously, but she went on and got a PhD in acoustic science, in building science, right? Specifically acoustical building science. And so now she works, I think she's actually a principal. What do you call it? What am I trying to say here? I'm tooting my friend's horn, not my own horn, but I'm shamelessly plugging a friend. But
yeah,
she's now principal at Arup, and
nice.
and leads a studio on acoustics in buildings. She actually, which one fun fact, right? As being a USC alum, as the acoustic principal, or one of the acoustic principals, she worked on some of the renovation work on the Coliseum, the LA Coliseum that USC football plays their games in. And so she got to go back as a highfalutin acoustical engineer, scientist, and develop some solutions to kind of like what you were saying. So some of it is there's like a twofold thing about, anyways, the real reason to bring it up is the science behind acoustics and structural stadium design and so on. I mean, there's a whole lot going on, like you mentioned, but part of the experience is avoiding the sound leaving the stadium and creating a nuisance for your neighbors, but also to trap it back in to intensify the experience for the people inside the space. And I didn't really think of that at first when I had her guest lecture for one of my classes and talk about some of these projects. It didn't really resonate, no pun intended, to
all puns intended,
to try
on the podcast,
to try and intensify the interior environment in a setting like a stadium. So anyway,
certainly, I think it's unique and something that sort of isn't visually obvious to folks. I think when everyone thinks of sporting events and just crowd size and people with, meters trying to read the decibel level and, and putting their earplugs in and all that, all that kind of stuff. And everybody sort of can visualize all those things or has experienced those things. But I think the unique part and what's sort of evident in what you're describing at USC and then also here with Austin FC is, and with this sketch really, is that you really sort of see this airfoil of a roof structure. And so the underside of it, interestingly enough, is sort of a perf metal. So there's a perforated skin that's allowing the sound waves to both get redirected in some ways, but also I think transfer through it at a different rate. And so because they're not necessarily reverberating off of a surface. And and I think it becomes really kind of interesting, because I think from all intents and purposes of having experienced many, many matches there now, is that it is a really, really loud environment. And it's a very kind of live space. We talk about live and dead spaces, in acoustics. I think that the trick about Austin FC, I've talked about this with a lot of friends who've attended, and other folks as well. And you kind of hear this from, kind of people's commentary, is the trick about acoustics is also sort of trusting the architecture to do its job, and letting that fan experience sort of, be what it needs to be. Supporter sections for soccer, they bring drums and things like that, very similar to almost like a college football environment, like you're describing. But I think that the unnecessary evil in this is sometimes they also have the actual speaker system too loud in the stadiums. And so there's the
competing
sounds of sort of match announcer and stadium ambiance sound. It almost becomes unnecessary. And the architecture itself is, especially when the architecture is doing its job. And so someone from Arup, certainly, kind of the gold standard of, blending architecture and engineering, that's fantastic to hear, and nice to hear that she's able to kind of connect with some of your students for a lecture. That's pretty awesome.
Yes, it was Elizabeth. If you're actually listening, thank you. Because it was, I was able to get her on the calendar like a week before she was due for her first child.
Wow. So yeah.
Yeah.
So you were
very
calling in favors like at all levels.
Yes, I was very thankful, and she did a fantastic job, and kind of inspiring my students to sort of think beyond the core, like the core textbook things that, speakers, amplification, so on. Yeah, she really makes it fun, and she does teach a little bit too. So I think what was I going to say? Well, I guess she has a natural ability to. She's just a very lively person.
The affinity is already there. Yeah,
she makes a lot of things fun. So anyway,
speaking of fun.
Yeah. So, and some news, right? I mean, something that we've discussed before, and I wanted to bring this back up. So I recently heard in the news, and you must have as well, because you just created this brand new sketch of the Christo project on the Arc de Triomphe in Paris, France. We had our good friend Matt Dumich on in was it season 1 or 2? I can't remember.
It's been a while.
We'll have to look back. I was just kind of trying to do some cataloging, and I saw the thumbnail from that episode, and remembered how much of a good time we had. But anyway, Matt and yourself are two big fans of Christo's work. Well, I'm a fan too, but I think both of you are a little extra fans, and that's okay. And so we had a really interesting conversation about Christo's work. I think Matt's seen other examples. Jamie has seen other examples, not this project, but other projects by him. And so basically, I should have led with this part, is that this exhibit, or this installation by Christo, is finally in the flesh, or in the curtain out there. And so what, Christo is known for is wrapping significant features in fabric, and usually a single color, usually a fairly bright and punchy color, so he shrouds entire structures like this. The Arc de Triomphe is completely shrouded in a fabric, and it definitely changes the perception and perspective of these objects, and they don't stay up permanently, but it's a sort of a kind of an interesting way to like hide a historic or significant structure. It takes on a different kind of appearance. And then I think, I'm sure another exciting moment is sort of like when you unwrap the structure, and then Christo's fabric goes away, and then you're reintroduced to this piece of architecture that you maybe have taken for granted over the years, because it's just there. Something like the Arc de Triomphe, right, which is just, and my French pronunciation is probably very terrible, but anyway, so
I love that. I love that perspective on it. I think, it is sort of like a gift. I mean, it's sort of a gift of viewing it this way, for one thing, and then also a gift of, the memory of it wrapped, as well as sort of, being present again in a different way with it unwrapped. I think I recently saw in sort of leading up to this installation becoming complete and being unveiled, so to speak, there was a little clip of Christo, talking about his and Jean-Claude, their process, and the reason why the artworks are temporary, and the reason why, you can't necessarily buy this particular piece of art. They do sell, and they've always sold more traditional pieces of art to finance these projects. But then, the signature piece, the one that everybody talks about, the event architecture is the way I like to think about it. Mm-hmm. It's sort of event architecture is sort of, and is riding that fine line with art. And I think that there's a lot of inherent design challenges with doing something like this, that really blends the best of both the art and the architecture. And then the fact that it is, as you described it, wrapping a piece of architecture, that's recognizable, big A architecture, and then in literally sort of transforming it is really sort of a special thing. And he describes it, and describes both that process, but also the temporary nature of it. And that it is, there's a democratic aspect to it, is sort of the way he describes it as well, where this is art for the people, and the event is for the people. And I think that it's so fitting that in a city that they loved so much, in Paris, and really sort of, started their career, is, this piece, now that they've both passed, I think this piece is sort of a beautiful kind of lasting memory and lasting image. The Champs-Elysees is closed. Mm-hmm. And, people are walking up to this on a street that was, maybe one of the busiest in Paris for a long time. And, that axial nature of that city, for those who visited or have seen images of it, you have these sort of icons at different points along these axes, and the Champs-Elysees and the Arc de Triomphe are definitely those memorable images. I mean, you see something like this, or you see the Louvre, or you see the Eiffel Tower, and you immediately know what city you're in. And I think that's, it's the ambition and the ego of doing something like this.
Sorry.
The ambition and ego of doing something like this is pretty exciting, and to see it in the flesh, in person, would be. It's something that's hard to describe. I mean, was fortunate to go with M to London, and that trip, with her was super special, and for a lot of reasons. But I think it was, her first trip to Europe, but seeing an artist that I've admired for so long, and to finally see, I'd seen their work in museums before, of the ones that they had sold to finance projects, and I'd seen documentaries. It's very, very familiar with their work, but never having really seen one and experienced one in real life. I thought I'd go and see the Gates in New York, and didn't get there. And there was a project in Colorado that may or may not happen still. But going to Hyde Park in London and seeing a project that I really wasn't as familiar with, frankly, was pretty exciting. And it was a beautiful trip, and knew this one was coming hot on the heels of that, and thought that I might be able to make another European trip and vacation, with my daughter and see this. But this project actually was delayed. And so when you bring up Matt, in our conversation with Matt, I know that he was planning a trip to Paris to try and see it on its last go round. The last time we thought that we were going to get it.
Right.
And so I don't know if he's made the trip. That would be interesting to find out. We'll find out probably after we post this. But I'm curious if any of our friends actually get there to see it, because the windows of time for these projects are relatively small, And I think that's
Yeah.
that sort of makes it a little bit more special. And we're
Mhm.
not going to talk about NFTs. So, but
Yeah, yeah,
this
yeah.
is Christo's the original NFT.
Yeah.
So
Uh, Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, I know so little about that stuff, so I'm not even going to go there. But yeah, well, I wonder how long it will be up. I wonder, and I was also wondering if Matt and his wife were going to make the trip again. Right, we're now still in the midst of a pandemic, and actually, I don't know if Europe is allowing Americans to go there at the moment. So
I believe
it might not
that
be.
it's, yeah, I believe France is, you have to be fully vaccinated
Okay. So
for entry, but
levels of
yeah,
security. Yeah, sure.
definitely, it's still a difficult time for a lot of folks to travel. And, but the fact that this is out in the real world is pretty fantastic.
Yeah.
And fabric is really hard to draw. I'll just say that. Just like me complaining about water, fabric is kind
right.
of on the same
The
level.
creases and
Yeah.
the multitude of shade and shadow that can come out of a curving or pleated piece of fabric or something like that.
I mean, if anyone has ever taken like an intro drawing course and the instructor takes a piece of paper and crumples it and throws it on the desk and makes you try and draw that shade and shadow and form, I think that whole exercise, in there's probably somebody who's written sort of a treatise on how that's either discouraged so many artists or created masterminds like Christo and Jean-Claude, for projects like this. So
yeah, true. I mean, a lot of their work starts off like a sketch as well. And so, they're doing their best to render the reality that they intend to have, and so that they can help promote the adoption of the project, right, to the proposal, right, the acceptance of the proposal or proposed project. So but I think you do. I mean, I don't knock your own work, man. This stuff is no, it's a great sketch because you have you know the rendering of the fabric, but also utilizing vertical lines that kind of hint at sky beyond, and I love how you silhouetted either, would those be clouds or trees?
tree at the ground plane and then clouds in the sky.
Yeah,
Yeah, as sort
which
of a reverse.
yeah,
So
yeah, which is nice texture. I'm gonna start showing my students in I'm teaching a second year studio, and I want them to start seeing a little more sketching, and so I'm going to start sharing your stuff with them.
well,
Encourage.
that's very flattering and makes me think, that maybe there's a reason why I got asked to teach a session at our state architecture convention as a pre-convention workshop.
That's right.
But no, it's true. I mean, it's I think that there's training in what we do, and there's training in art and rendering things, and there's certainly some very, very talented people out there, I think, but it's how it gets applied and sort of the decision making, and like you're saying about their process as artists, recognizing that they've got to create this wonder and excitement and this provocation. What does it look like to wrap a building that everybody knows, or an architecture feature that everybody knows? How does it get transformed? What does it look like to have fabric kind of laying across the body, the body being the architecture, and sort of what does that do? It's very figural. There's a figure drawing aspect to it that I kind of love. And so, for me, it's a lot of different things that sort of all intersect. And I've just always sort of enjoyed their work and kind of love it.
But, yeah, and then like the from sketch to reality. Right?
Yeah, and then
pulling it off.
You got to pull it off. I mean, you that's the whole thing. That's the trick that we all want to do with all of our work.
We'll have to. There's another side by side comparison episode that we could probably do in the future, but I'm not ready yet. I'll let you know. We'll talk about off the record.
Well,
we'll come back to
that. I love those subtle asides. It makes me kind of
antsy
Handsy.
hopefully.
Yeah.
But
So
well, was one thing I wanted to add before we had something special to wrap up on, but I also wanted to talk about this sketch too because it kind of reminds me of Danielle's clear obsession with all things French right now. And so,
so
she's
are you planning a trip? Is that what is that
yeah.
or is that the crescendo of all this, all things French and
Oh
France?
no, actually, yeah, we are going to start saving up to go out there. I think it might be a little while till it actually happens because we're going to try and take her niece who will be graduating high school and kind of turn it into an event around that. So it might be a couple of years, but it gives us plenty of time to learn French, which is what Danielle is doing right now. She's trying to learn French
Oh wow.
or yeah, brush up on some French, but we're eating a little more French food. There's a great bakery so now that I have to drive to campus, there's a great bakery in on the way, like close to campus, that is owned by two French people, Chez Pierre et Genevieve Bakery. Or well, actually, they wouldn't call it bakery. What's the what's the French patisserie or
That's yeah.
boulangerie? And so I pick
So
up.
Danielle's going to be doing all the speaking on your trip. Is that basically like
Well, I mean, at first, yeah, yes,
okay?
majority. I'm going to rely on her, but then so we're getting baguettes and some sourdough. And the cool part is they import all their flours from France.
Oh really?
So they're utilizing, ingredients that you can't get here otherwise. So, well, you might be able to find it, but I don't know. It's probably very difficult.
Well,
And
and it's funny you mentioned that. Is that I was talking to somebody recently about, and this is it's sort of in a baking kind of vibe, but people who are from other places, even those of us who sort of you don't realize that we're from somewhere else. But I have really strong memories of when my grandparents would come and stay with us for a month or two, and one of the things was there was always one extra piece of luggage that was full of ingredients, typically that were only Canadian, like things that you could only get in Canada that my mom wasn't able to get wherever we happened to be living in the US at the time. And so they were just, certain things that she had sort of grown up accustomed to using in the kitchen. And my grandmother would always make sure that, she would kind of get the list and then have a few little extra treats in there for me. And,
yeah,
but yeah, I mean, and I think that and a lot of folks, I mean, when they think back on their childhood or kind of growing up or their families, especially if you have, relatives from other countries or they themselves are from other countries, there's, I think that sort of sharing and cooking and that sort of ingredient. I mean, we certainly live in a much more different world now where there's a lot of access to some of those things, but there's still, certain ways of doing things that I think is sort of, the making of it and some of those sort of ingredient stories are sort of fun. So to hear that they're doing something like that, there's an authenticity
yeah.
that you can kind of appreciate.
Oh yeah, and it's so good, so good. All right, so we should talk about Batman real quick. That was the perfect segue.
Perfect segue
To the yeah. So lastly, let's just talk about Batman, right? So there's a new Batman on its way.
Yeah. But I mean, do we need to say anything more other than it's Batman Day? And so that means a Batman sketch. And this one is just the Bat and the Cat. And
The Bat, okay.
That's all I've got.
That's true. Not much left else to say, but although it is a nice sketch, and I did watch the latest trailer, which is just so good, so intriguing. I was a little skeptical at first when I heard before all this, and they announced that it was going to be Robert Pattinson. I mean, the only other thing I remember is the Twilight stuff, but man, Bruce Wayne, Batman, it's looking pretty good from what I could tell so far. So
I'll just say that there probably will be some more Batman sketches, but I'm definitely had to get one in on Batman Day.
Yeah, no, thanks. And it's not overlooked on my end. Let's let you know that much. So I like to see him. Very cool. Anyway, thanks, Jamie. It's good. It's a good tour that you just gave me. From Bucky to Batman.
Bucky to Batman. Here we go. Thanks, Kurt.
Oh, wait. Oh.